The final set review video for Shadows Over Innistrad Remastered. We're going to go through the multicolour stuff, colourless, artifacts, lands, and then all the double-faced cards as well. Will be the longest one, so I'm going to try not to stop too much for anything that's not really playable. So let's hop into it. Kicking things off with Altered Ego, a nice clone effect. I posted a video with Gyruda combo, where you're kind of like bringing back a bunch of clones, cloning Gyruda. Outside of that, it doesn't really have a use case to see play in Pioneer Explorer, except for maybe getting tutored up off of Enigmatic Incarnation. Anguished Unmaking, 1 white black, exile on permanent, you lose 3 life. Nowadays we just have so many other good options. It is nice that they've downgraded it for a rare to an uncommon for that reason. Bloodhole Priest, a cool manless vampire card, but not really playable. Moving on then, Fevered Visions, 1 blue-red enchantment. At the beginning of each player's end step, that player draws a card. If the player is your opponent and has 4 or more cards in hand, Fevered Visions deals 2 damage to that player. It used to be an alternate win condition in blue-red decks. It's not seen any play in Pioneer, and is probably just too slow overall. Gissa and Geralf is a nice one for Brawl, but other than that, not doing much in actual Constructed. And then Grimflayer is a card that we've not seen get played much in Pioneer. And if you've got a good way to turn Delirium on, it makes a nice 2-drop threat, but so far hasn't really found a home. Maybe it can break through in Explorer, where the card pool isn't as deep. Heron's Grace Champion, Mercurial Geists, Morn Willow. None of these are going to make it into Constructed, unfortunately. Then we have Nahiri the Harbinger, 2 red white, comes in on 4 loyalty, +2 you may discard a card if you do draw a card, -2 exile target enchantment, tapped artifact or tap creature, and then -8 search the library for an artifact or creature card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle, it gains haste, return to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. It's a card that's not really seen a ton of play in Pioneer. That -2 ability, the most common thing you could think of is like Wandering Emperor, which is flash and is obviously incredible. Nahiri's not really shined. Part of that is that the main draw to Nahiri is being able to use that -8 to tutor up a big threat. In Modern, we've seen it get played with Emrakul, the Aeon's Torn, but we've not really got a formidable threat in Pioneer Explorers Tutor 4. We've seen like Torrential Gearhawk in the past, but it's not really found a home, but it's a nice one to have on the platform. Olivia Mobilized for War, 1 black-red, 3/3 flying. Whenever another creature enters the battle that you control, you may discard a card, and then if you do, it gets a counter and haste and becomes a vampire. It's a bit too slow for Pioneer. I talked about it before, there's like a couple of different like manless vampire cards in the set, but not enough. If at some point in the future we get some vampire support, maybe it gets there, but not for now. And then lastly on the line here, we've got Prized Amalgam, one of the cards I'm looking forward to playing with the most. 1 blue-black for a 3/3 zombie creature. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, if it entered from your graveyard or you cast it from your graveyard, return Prized Amalgam from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped at the beginning of your next end step. This is the best card in the Pioneer Explorer version of Dredge. We've been waiting for it, and will make the deck really formidable. The one kind of caveat to that is because of Greasefang and other graveyard decks in the format, people are playing a lot of graveyard hate in their sideboards already. However, obviously we have best of 1 queues on Arena, and so Prized Amalgam might put up quite a showing there. I do like the Dredge deck, even if it's a little just weak to hate in best of 3. Ride Down, Sigarda Heron's Grace, Sorin Grim Nemesis. Unfortunately, none of these have really made it through into Pioneer. Ride Down is trying to block creatures, just too conditional. Sigarda, a bit too expensive. Sorin is very sweet. It's a good planeswalker, it's just too expensive for Pioneer Explorer at 6 mana. And then the last 2 multicolour cards, Spell Queller, which is obviously a huge addition for Spirits. It makes the blue-white and Bant versions of the deck really strong, along with the addition of Selfless Spirit we saw in the white section. 1 white blue for a 2/3 flash flying spirit creature. When the spell card enters the battlefield, exile target spell with mana value 4 or less, and when it leaves the battlefield, the exile card's owner may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Seen play in other places as well outside of Spirits, whether that be like blue-white flash, and we've also seen it out of the sideboard in some control decks as well. Then we have Tamio, which is really sweet, but not good enough for Constructed for the most part. +1, choose up to 2 target creatures until your next turn. Whenever either of those deals combat damage, you draw a card. -2, tap up to 2 target non-land permanents. They don't untap during their controller's next untap step. And that -7 ability, draw 3 cards, you get an emblem with you may cast spells from your hand without paying their mana costs. Pretty powerful, that ability, but hey, the +1, the -2, cost 4 mana, just not doing enough to impact Constructed. And that brings us into Colourless. A bunch of sweet cards here, brings us into the Emerge mechanic. Kind of like you can pay the emerge cost for a creature by sacrificing a creature you play in play and paying the difference between its value and the emerge cost. They're creatures that are overpriced at the top, but with that discount, you become quite potent. So Abundant Maw, 8 mana, 6/4, emerge for 6 and a black. When you cast it, target opponent loses 3 life, you gain 3 life. Not really a big impact. It's obviously a big creature, but quite expensive. Probably not going to do anything. Desecrate of the Provinces is a bit more interesting. 10 mana, emerge for 6 green. When you cast it, creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain trample turn, and then it has Trample Haste as a 7/7 itself. It's a nice win condition for decks playing green creatures with loads of ramp stuff. Something like Elves could try this. Something like Mono Green is like a game-ending threat. There are a few different variations on this effect. It's that kind of Craterhoof Behemoth style ability. We'll see. Extended Mindbender is awesome, but hasn't really, well, not many of these emerge cards have made it through into Pioneer. Hoping something changes there for them to have a home in Constructed. But hey, Descendant Mindbender, emerge for 5 black. When you cast it, target opponent reveals their hand. Choose a non-land card from it with mana value 3 or less, and another card with mana value 4 or greater. That player discards those cards. It's not Mind Twist, but hey, it sort of is. And then you get a 5/5 body. A few more emerge creatures. So Dranyard Behemoth has hexproof when it enters the battlefield, and then also has flash. 9 mana, 5/7, emerge for 7 and a blue. It's not a huge deal. Elder Deep Fiend is a bit more exciting. My favourite emerge creature, probably most people's favourite emerge creature. 8 mana for a 5/6 with flash, emerge for 5 blue, and when you cast it, tap up to 4 target permanents. Has that kind of Mistbind Clique style ability, where you can kind of, alright, go ahead, pass the turn, and then upkeep, try and tap your opponent's lands. You can use it in combat to tap your opponent's lands while ambushing their creatures. Really strong card, a lot of potential, but hasn't really found a home in Pioneer. Maybe that changes in Explorer. We'll see how things go. Emrakul, obviously one of the most iconic cards from Shadows block. 13 mana for a 13/13. Flying, Trample, Protection from Instants, costs 1 less to cast for each card type among cards in your graveyard, kind of like that Delirium theme. When you cast a spell, you gain control of the target opponent during that player's next turn, and then after that they get another turn. That kind of Mindslaver effect, we've seen it come up as a tutorable threat in Modern with things like Traverse builds or Eladamri's Call. We don't currently have a strong Delirium deck in Pioneer. It's something that was popular in the format quite early days, but it's kind of fallen to the wayside. Emrakul is a super powerful card, and obviously it's good with things like Marvel as well if you want to try and do that kind of stuff. But hey, I'm hoping we've got a Delirium deck coming back to light. And then last few colourless cards. Eternal Scourge is a bit of a weird one. 3 mana for a 3/3. You can cast it from exile. Whenever it becomes the target of a spell or ability opponent controls, it gets exiled. It's an odd card, but it has some use cases. Mockery of Nature is an emerge card. 7 green to emerge at 9 mana on the front face as a 6/5. When you cast it, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment. It's notable also that these are all like cast triggers on the emerge cards, and with Emrakul, so you get them regardless of whether the spell actually resolves if your opponent has a counter spell. And then lastly, Wretched Griff, 7 mana for a 3/4 flyer, emerge for 5 and a blue. When you cast a spell, draw a card. Simple, straightforward. The other card that I should mention while we're talking about all the emerge creatures is Kozilek's Return, which we don't have on Arena yet, but at some point I imagine it will be on there. Emerging these creatures used to be a really powerful way to trigger Kozilek's Return. You get to do that with a creature on the stack, do the 5 damage, and then carry on and resolve your emerge effect. It used to be a deck into itself, and I wonder if we'll get that on Arena soon too. Moving on over into Artifact. Brain in a Jar, downgraded from a rare to an uncommon. Unfortunately, due to some ruling changes with fuse cards, there isn't really a deck for this anymore. It used to be played with some of the Dragon's Maze fuse cards like Beck and Call, so you could cast like Beck but actually cast the full thing with 2 counters. Unfortunately, not really constructed playable anymore. Stitcher's Graft, Tamio's Journal, not really constructed playable, but sweet things to add on to Arena. Then we have Terrarian, Truth Faith Dancer, and Wildfield Scarecrow. The last 2 of those aren't very playable, but if you like eggs, Terrarian is a card that might interest you. 1 mana enters the battlefield tapped, 2 tap sacrifice it, add 2 mana in any combination of colours. When it spins the graveyard of the battlefield, draw a card. Note, without sacrificing it, you still draw the cards if you're sacrificing to something else. If there's some eggs shenanigans going on in Pioneer Explorer, Terrarian might be a culprit for that. The next few cards here, Epitaph Golem, Explosive Apparatus, Field Creeper, none of these constructed playable. And then we have Lupine Prototype, Magnifying Glass, Murderer's Axe. Unfortunately, none of these constructed playable. Lupine Prototype obviously has some potential. It's a 2 mana 5/5, but can't attack or block unless a player has no cards in hand. Last couple of artifacts here, Slayer's Plate, Soul Separator. Neither of these constructed playable. Gonna just keep it moving. The lands. So, Choke Testery, Foreboding Ruins, and then also Fortified Village, Game Trail, and Port Town. I'm really happy that they've downgraded this cycle to uncommon because they're not really constructed playable, but it is nice to have dual lands accessible on Arena, and so having them at uncommon is cool. The big important land printing though is Gaia Reach Sanitarium here. Legendary land taps for Colourless, but has this 2-tap, each player draws a card, then discards a card ability. Really strong with the card Narset Potter of Veils. It's a nice little kind of quote-unquote free combo you can put in with Nahiri Sanitarium. It's like a one of in your blue-based control deck or mid-range deck mana base. Pretty sweet. Really glad to have it on Arena. We'll be messing around with that a bit. And now we get down to all the double-faced cards and mill cards. So a Curse of Witch I'm not going to stop on. Not really one for Constructed. Archangel Alvacin, however, is pretty powerful if a little fringe on the edge of kind of Pioneer. 3 white, Flash, Flying, Vigilance, 4/4 Angel. When Archangel Alvacin enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain indestructible end of turn. In addition to that flash ability, obviously super powerful. When a non-angel creature you control dies, transform it at the beginning of your next upkeep, and then transforms into Avacyn the Purifier. 6/5 now, flying, and then when it transforms, it deals 3 damage to each other creature and each opponent. You have to work very hard to make it do anything. Both your creatures and your opponent's creatures and your opponent's face. So you have to be a little careful with your creatures, and sometimes your opponent can trigger this when you're not looking. She's in play in like blue-white flash, those kind of decks. An interesting threat is a card that you can sideboard in and out of control decks as well. Seen some play in the format, but not a ton. Moving on to In Chords, a cool planeswalker, but a bit too slow for Pioneer and Explorer, but is a sweet card. Conduit of Storms and Cryptolith Fragment, which we have here, not really constructed playable, but Bruna is a bit more interesting. 5 white for a 5/7. Obviously, it's 7 mana, which is quite expensive. Angel Horror, when you cast a spell, you may return target angel or human creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. So quite a powerful ability. Obviously, something like Mono White Urine, you can bring it back. And then melds with Gazella the Broken Blade. I guess we should skip down to now. These are all in alphabetical order rather than color order. Gazella is a 2 white 4/3 flying first strike lifelink angel. Pretty powerful, but this 3 toughness makes her quite weak to things like Lightning Strike, other damage-based removal. At the beginning of your end step, if you combine both Gazella and Bruna, you exile them and meld them into Brizella, Voice of Nightmares. So let me scroll back up. Let's get to Brizella. A 9/10, flying, first strike, vigilance, lifelink, and then your opponents can't cast spells with mana value 3 or less. A pretty powerful ability if you can flip them both around. It's a little difficult, but of the mill cards, I think this is the one that's most likely to see some play, just because we've seen some Nick Plus builds of Angels already, even if that 7 mana is quite expensive, or in something like Mono White Urine, it is a nice kind of package that you can add in. A few blue transform cards here: Curious Homunculus, Daring Sleuth, Dose of Perfection. None of these going to make it into Constructed, unfortunately. Then we have Duskwatch Recruiter, my favourite transform card here. Is that true? Yeah, I think it is. And then Gastavs, Arsonist, and Gyreach Bandit, which aren't really Constructed playable. Duskwatch Recruiter, though, 1 green for a 2/2. It's a bear, but actually human, warrior, werewolf. So relevant creature types as well. 2 and a green, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest of the bottom of your library in any order, and then at the beginning of each upkeep, obviously it has the werewolf ability. If no spells were cast last turn, transform Duskwatch Recruiter. If you're not familiar with the old werewolf mechanic, it's simply if no spells were cast in the last turn, it transforms. And then it transforms into Kralin Horde Howler. Creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and at the beginning of each upkeep, obviously, if a player has cast 2 spells, it transforms back. A 3/3 on this side. The most important thing here, really, is the 2 and a green ability to look at the top 3 cards of your library, reveal a creature card, put it into your hand. Super nice card advantage, but has often been used as a way to utilize infinite mana out of things like Druid combo in Modern. That's where I've played it the most, really. That and like Bank Company style decks. Alright, we've been through Gazella already. Graph Rats, unfortunately, while cool, not going to make an impact. But Hangman Battlements is a cool land. Red tap, target creature gains haste to end a turn. Other than that, just taps for Colourless. Does merge with Hanweir Garrison into Hanweir the Writhing Township, which is a 7/4 trample haste. When it attacks, makes 2/3/2 Eldrazi Horror tokens tapped attacking, which is powerful, but flipping it is quite difficult. This ability on a land to give creatures haste is super powerful. I think Dom Harvey was the one who popularized it in some older versions of the Amulet of Vigor deck in Modern. Cool land to have around at the format. Got ways to cheer up the land, like say maybe Ubermord Hydra. Then hey, it's a nice one to have in your toolbox. Oh, of course, here is actually Hanweir Garrison. It's a 3 mana 2/3, and then whenever it attacks, it makes 2 1/1 red human creatures. It's a human soldier itself, which is obviously a relevant creature type. 3 mana for 2/3, not immediately impacting, so it doesn't have haste itself. Not really good enough for Constructed, just too many other good human options, really. And then the other cards here, Harvest Hand, Hinterland Lodger, yeah, not even close. Kindly Stranger, Lone Rider, Midnight Scavengers, nope, none of these going to make an impact on Constructed. And then moving down the list, Neglected Heirloom, Sage of Ancient Lore, Shill Howler, also not going to have any impact. Getting towards the end of the double face cards now. So Startled Awake is a cool build card. A bit too slow, honestly. It has this ability to turn it from your graveyard to the battlefield, and then it goes back to your... When it deals combat damage, it goes back to your hand to reuse it, but there's just... You don't have time to be doing this stuff in Pioneer Explorer. Thing in the Ice, though, a really important addition to the format for decks like Phoenix and other kind of blue X troll or mid-range decks. 1 in the blue 0/4 Defender enters the battlefield with 4 ice counters. When you cast an instant or sorcery spell, remove an ice counter from it, and then when it has no ice counters, it transforms into Awakened Horror, which is a 7/8, much bigger. When this creature transforms into Awakened Horror, it returns all non-horror creatures to their owner's hands. So makes your opponent pick their board back up, and then you start getting to attack with that 7/8 body. Pretty cool, pretty cool. And definitely like a huge printing for the Explorer format. Town Gossip Monger used to get played in Humans as Standard, but too slow for the Pioneer Explorer version of the deck. Then we have Ulrix the Crowlin Horde, Ubermore Captive Village Messenger. Unfortunately, none of these really getting that constructed. Ulrix, a nice one for Brawl, I suppose. And then the last 2 transform cards, Voldaren Pariah, not good enough constructed, unfortunately, just 5 mana too expensive. And then Westvale Abbey, which is a really nice addition to have on the format, even if it doesn't have a stable home in Pioneer yet. That's for Colourless, and then 5 tap, pay a life, create a 1/1 white black human creature cleric token. The reason you're playing it though, 5 tap, sacrifice 5 creatures, transform Westvale Abbey, then untap it. If you have a deck that wants to sacrifice 5 creatures, that kind of goes wide to that extent, either with tokens or something like sacrifice, then Westvale Abbey might be the card for you. You transform into Ormondol, Profane Prince, Flying, Lifelink, Indestructible, Haste, 9/7. Obviously, when it transforms, you tap it, but then it untaps when it's transformed. You get to attack with it straight away. Can be absolutely game ending, super hard to deal with, immune to like Supreme Verdicts and that kind of thing. And that lifelink as well also helps you stabilize the board versus aggro. Really sweet cards you have on Arena. We'll see if there ends up being a good home for it. And that is now all of the cards in Shadows Over Innistrad Remastered gone through. I've not touched on Shadows of the Past, which is the original Innistrad cards coming to Arena, but I'll leave a link to Shadows of the Past in the description of the video. If you enjoyed, please do like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Peace out.